There are moments in the history of life when a creature stands at the threshold of transformation, when the evolutionary forces that have shaped every living thing for billions of years suddenly converge on a single lineage and begin to sculpt something entirely new. 50 million years ago, along the shores of the ancient Tethys Sea, such a moment arrived. A wolf-sized creature, no larger than the animals that pad through our forests today, waded into shallow waters to hunt for fish. Its name was Pakicetus, and it carried within its body the blueprint for one of the most extraordinary metamorphoses our planet has ever witnessed. Before we continue this journey, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extraordinary for you. Consider for a moment what this animal was. Pakicetus possessed 4 legs built for running across land, a body covered in fur, lungs that breathed air, and warm blood pumping through mammalian veins. Yet within its skull, nestled in the delicate architecture of its inner ear, tiny bones had already begun to change. These bones, the malleus and incus and stapes, were shifting in shape and density, becoming denser, heavier, more suited to conducting sound through water than through air. Evolution had begun its work before the creature itself knew where it was heading. The blueprint was being drafted in microscopic detail, one generation at a time, preparing for an ocean that Pakicetus had not yet dreamed of inhabiting. The transformation did not happen overnight. 10 million years passed, a span of time so vast that it challenges our comprehension, yet in geological terms, it represents barely a heartbeat. During this immense stretch of years, the descendants of Pakicetus ventured deeper into the water. They discovered that the sea offered abundance beyond measure, fish and squid and creatures that had never known the threat of a land predator. Natural selection began to favor those individuals whose bodies worked better in this aquatic realm. Legs grew more powerful, capable of propelling bodies through resistant water. Spines became more flexible, undulating in waves that pushed against the medium with increasing efficiency. Then came Ambulocetus, the walking whale. Imagine witnessing this creature, if you can. It stretched nearly 10 feet from nose to tail, with legs still powerful enough to walk on land but transformed into something more. Its hind feet had broadened, webbed perhaps, creating paddles that could thrust against water with remarkable force. Its spine moved in vertical waves, up and down, like an otter's, rather than the side-to-side motion of its terrestrial ancestors. When it swam, it became something between worlds, neither fully aquatic nor fully terrestrial, but magnificently adapted to both. Its eyes sat high on its skull, allowing it to peer above the waterline while its body remained submerged, much like a crocodile waiting in ambush. The fossil record, incomplete though it is, offers us glimpses of this journey like frames from an ancient film. Each species represents not an endpoint, but a stage in continuous transformation. After Ambulocetus came Rhodocetus, smaller but more aquatic, its legs reduced further, its tail growing more powerful. Then Dorodon appeared, sleek and streamlined, looking remarkably like the dolphins we know today, but retaining tiny, vestigial hind legs that protruded from its body like evolutionary footnotes, reminders of where it had been. By 40 million years ago, Basilosaurus emerged from this lineage like a revelation. It stretched 50 feet through ancient seas, a serpentine giant whose body could no longer support itself on land. The transformation had reached a point of no return. Its tiny legs, no longer than a human forearm, dangled uselessly from a body that had committed entirely to the ocean. These vestigial limbs served no purpose in swimming, no function in hunting, yet they remained, testament to ancestry, proof written in bone that this creature had once walked on solid ground. But the most remarkable engineering was yet to come. Over the following millions of years, whales underwent changes so profound, so precisely calibrated, that they seem almost impossible when we examine them closely. Consider the nostrils. In land mammals, nostrils sit at the front of the face, perfectly positioned for breathing while the head remains level. But for an animal that must surface to breathe while swimming horizontally through water, this position creates terrible inefficiency. So evolution began to move them, 1 millimeter per generation, a distance so small it would have been invisible to any observer watching a parent and its offspring. Yet over 2 million generations, those nostrils migrated across the entire skull, traveling from the tip of the snout to the top of the head, where they became what we now call blowholes. The mathematics of this migration are staggering. 1 millimeter per generation, with perhaps 5 to 10 years between generations, means the journey took between 10 and 20 million years. Throughout this entire period, the nostrils had to remain functional. At no point could they become positioned in a way that would drown the animal or prevent it from breathing efficiently. Evolution does not plan ahead, does not know where it is going, yet somehow this migration occurred with such precision that every intermediate stage remained viable, remained advantageous, remained alive. The front legs tell an equally extraordinary story. They did not disappear like the hind legs, but transformed into flippers, streamlined paddles that steer and stabilize these massive bodies as they move through the sea. Yet beneath the smooth skin and blubber, beneath the hydrodynamic exterior, the bones remain. Every bone that exists in a human arm exists in a whale's flipper. The humerus, the radius and ulna, the carpals and metacarpals, even the individual finger bones, all present, all accounted for, compressed and rearranged, but unmistakably the same. When you look at the skeleton of a whale's flipper, you are looking at a hand. Your hand, modified for a different purpose, but built from the identical architectural plan that shapes every mammalian limb on Earth. And then there are the tail flukes, perhaps the most powerful propulsion system ever to evolve in any animal. These massive horizontal structures, spanning up to 25 feet in the largest whales, generate enough thrust to push a creature weighing 150 tons through the water. They contain no bones whatsoever. Unlike fish tails, which evolved from modified vertebrae, whale flukes developed from scratch, from connective tissue and muscle and skin, shaped by millions of years of selection pressure into structures of devastating efficiency. They move up and down rather than side to side, retaining the vertical spine motion of their mammalian ancestors even as they conquered the ocean. But perhaps the most challenging problem evolution had to solve was heat. Mammals are warm-blooded, maintaining body temperatures around 37 degrees Celsius regardless of their environment. On land, in air, this works beautifully. But water conducts heat away from bodies 25 times faster than air. A whale loses body heat at a rate that should be catastrophic, that should drain its metabolic resources and leave it frozen in the frigid depths. Evolution's solution borders on genius. In whale flippers and flukes, arteries carrying warm blood from the body core run directly alongside veins returning cold blood from the extremities. They intertwine so closely that heat transfers between them, warming the returning blood before it reaches the body core while cooling the outgoing blood before it reaches the extremities. Not a single degree of precious body heat escapes into the air. Ocean. This countercurrent heat exchange system maintains perfect thermal efficiency, allowing whales to keep their core temperature stable even in polar waters, where ice floats on the surface and temperatures hover near freezing. The journey from Pachycetus to modern whales took 30 million years. In that time, creatures that once ran on 4 legs through forests became beings that could dive 2 miles beneath the ocean surface, hold their breath for over 2 hours, and navigate across entire ocean basins without ever seeing land. Their hearts grew to weigh 400 pounds, massive organs that pump 60 gallons of blood with each beat, generating enough pressure to circulate blood through bodies the size of houses. Their arteries grew so large a human child could crawl through them. Their tongues alone weigh as much as elephants. Yet they remained mammals, retained their warm blood, their need to breathe air, their live birth and milk-fed young. They did not become fish, though they swim like fish. They did not become cold-blooded, though they live in cold water. Instead, they became something entirely unique, mammals shaped by the ocean into forms that match its demands while retaining the fundamental nature of their terrestrial origins. When we contemplate this transformation, when we trace the path from that wolf-sized creature at the water's edge to the 100-ton leviathans that roam our oceans today, we witness evolution not as theory but as documented fact, written in fossils, confirmed in DNA, visible in the vestigial legs still present in whale embryos. We see life's extraordinary capacity for change, its ability to take a body plan designed for one environment and over deep time reshape it completely for another. The whales carry their history within them. Every breath they take at the surface reminds us they once breathed on land. Every bone in their flippers speaks of legs that once walked. Every instinct to bear, live young and nurse. For them with milk connects them to the small furry creatures that scurried through ancient forests while dinosaurs still ruled the earth. They are, in the most profound sense, us. Their ancestors were our ancestors. The same evolutionary forces that shaped them shaped us. The same deep time that transformed them from land to sea has been transforming all life on Earth for billions of years, creating the magnificent diversity we see around us, the endless forms most beautiful that fill every corner of our planet. And now, millions of years after that first tentative wade into the shallows, whales own the oceans. They are the ocean's undisputed giants, creatures so perfectly adapted to their realm that they make our human attempts at underwater exploration seem clumsy and crude. They dive deeper than our submarines, navigate more accurately than our compasses, and communicate across distances that dwarf our radio signals. The transformation is complete. The land has been left behind, and in the leaving, something magnificent has emerged. Creatures that embody the power of change itself, living proof that given enough time, life can accomplish transformations that seem impossible when we imagine them happening, but become inevitable when we trace their actual path through deep time. The giants left the land, and in doing so, they became something far greater than what they left behind. Every autumn, as the days grow shorter and the Arctic waters begin their descent toward winter darkness, 20,000 grey whales begin to move. They are responding to something ancient, something written into their very cells, a call that has echoed through their species for millions of years. From the feeding grounds of the Bering Sea, where summer abundance has fattened them for the journey ahead, they turn south. They are embarking on the longest migration of any mammal on Earth, a journey that will carry them 12,000 miles round trip, from the cold, productive waters near Alaska to the warm, shallow lagoons of Baja California, and back again. Imagine the scope of this journey. 12,000 miles. It is equivalent to travelling halfway around the Earth at the equator. For a creature swimming through water, fighting currents, navigating storms, avoiding predators, this represents a feat of endurance that staggers the imagination. Yet grey whales make this journey every single year. Mothers with calves, pregnant females, males, juveniles, all following invisible pathways through the ocean with precision that rivals our most sophisticated navigation systems. But how? How does a whale, swimming beneath the surface where no landmarks exist, where everything is blue water in all directions, find its way across thousands of miles of open ocean to arrive at specific lagoons barely a few miles wide? The answer lies in biology so elegant it seems almost like science fiction. Within the skull of every grey whale, nestled among the tissues of the brain, are tiny crystals of magnetite. This mineral, an iron oxide, is naturally magnetic. The crystals are not randomly distributed but concentrated in specialized cells connected to the whale's nervous system. These cells function as biological compasses, detecting the Earth's magnetic field with precision that matches our best-engineered instruments. As the whale swims, it senses the invisible lines of magnetic force that wrap around our planet, curving from pole to pole. It can detect not just direction but also intensity, allowing it to determine its latitude, its position north or south. The whale is quite literally reading the planet's own magnetic field as a map. But magnetism alone does not explain the full precision of whale navigation. Consider the ocean itself. From the surface it appears uniform, a vast expanse of water stretching to the horizon. Yet beneath that surface, the ocean is anything but uniform. Currents flow like rivers through the sea, massive movements of water, driven by temperature, salinity, the rotation of the Earth itself. These currents carry distinct temperatures, sometimes varying by only a fraction of a degree from the surrounding water. Grey whales possess skin sensors capable of detecting temperature changes of 1/10 of a degree Celsius. Think about that precision. 1/10 of a degree, a difference so subtle that human skin could never perceive it, that most thermometers would struggle to measure. Yet to a grey whale, this minute difference is a highway marker, a signpost indicating which current it has entered, where that current flows, how to follow it, or when to leave it for another path. These abilities were demonstrated in the most remarkable way in 1988, when a grey whale calf was orphaned and rescued by marine biologists. They named her JJ. She was raised in captivity at SeaWorld, fed by humans, protected from danger, taught nothing about the migration routes her species follows. When she was large enough and healthy enough, she was released back into the ocean. Scientists wondered, would she know where to go? Could instinct alone guide her without ever having made the journey, without ever following an experienced whale who knew the way? She swam south. She navigated the California coast with precision, following the exact route that wild grey whales take, despite having never seen it before. She arrived at the breeding lagoons of Baja California at the appropriate time, swimming into waters she had never visited, guided entirely by information encoded in her genes. The path was not learned. It was inherited, passed down through millions of years of evolution, written into her DNA like a map she was born knowing how to read. This genetic inheritance speaks to something profound about the migration itself. It is not a recent adaptation, not something whales figured out a few thousand years ago. The migration is ancient, so deeply embedded in whale biology that it has become instinctual, automatic, as fundamental to their nature as breathing or feeding. The routes they follow are pathways carved by evolutionary time, refined across countless generations until they represent the optimal paths through the ocean, the safest routes, the most efficient trajectories between feeding and breeding grounds. Yet whales are not mindless automatons following predetermined paths. They demonstrate remarkable flexibility within their inherited knowledge. When conditions change, when food becomes scarce in traditional feeding areas, when new obstacles appear, whales adapt. They explore alternative routes, discover new feeding grounds, modify their timing. In recent years, grey whales have been appearing in unexpected locations: the Mediterranean Sea, the Atlantic coast of Africa, places they have not been seen in centuries. They are exploring, testing new possibilities, perhaps responding to changing ocean conditions by expanding their range. But grey whales are not alone in their epic journeys. Consider the humpback whales. These magnificent creatures undertake migrations that span entire ocean basins, travelling from polar feeding grounds to tropical breeding waters and back each year. Some humpback populations travel over 5,000 miles one way, spending months travelling, months in breeding grounds, months travelling back, in a never-ending cycle that dominates their lives. And they sing while they travel. In fact, they compose entirely new songs each breeding season. The songs are complex, structured compositions with verses and choruses, rhythmic patterns and melodic themes that any human musician would recognize as music. Each population has its own song, its own dialect. Australian humpbacks perform 30-minute concerts, elaborately structured compositions that unfold like symphonies. Caribbean singers create shorter 10-minute arrangements, different themes, different patterns, but equally complex. Most remarkably, all the males in a population sing the same song. Not similar songs, but identical songs, matching each other note for note, rhythm for rhythm. And throughout the breeding season, the song changes. New phrases are added, old phrases drop out, rhythms shift, melodies evolve, and all the whales update their songs together, in synchrony, creating a living composition that changes in real time across an entire population. How do they coordinate this? Scientists discovered that whale songs spread across ocean basins like cultural phenomena, like hit songs spreading through human populations. A phrase that appears in the songs of Australian humpbacks will, within months, appear in the songs of whales 3,000 miles away, near Tonga. The whales are listening to each other across vast distances, learning from each other, adopting new musical ideas and incorporating them into their own songs. It is cultural transmission, the passing of learned behaviors not through genetics but through teaching and learning, exactly as humans pass culture through generations. The songs travel through something called the deep sound channel, a layer of water between 800 and 1,200 meters deep where sound waves travel with minimal loss. At this depth, temperature and pressure create conditions where sound moves with extraordinary efficiency, spreading horizontally for thousands of miles without weakening. A whale singing in this channel can be heard halfway across an ocean basin. The ocean becomes a concert hall of planetary scale, carrying melodies through the darkness, connecting singers and listeners across distances that would take months to swim. Blue whales produce sounds that dwarf even these impressive humpback songs. Their calls reach 188 decibels, measured at the source. To put this in perspective, a jet engine at takeoff produces around 140 decibels. A blue whale call is louder than the loudest sound humans regularly create. These calls are not high-pitched songs but deep rumbling tones, vibrating at frequencies between 10 and 40 hertz, below the range of human hearing. We cannot hear them without special equipment, but we can feel them if we are close enough. They vibrate through the water, through the sea floor, through the very planet itself. Scientists have discovered that blue whale calls travel through the mid-ocean ridges, the massive underwater mountain ranges that run like seams down the center of ocean basins. These ridges act as amplifiers, channeling and focusing sound waves, allowing blue whales to communicate across entire oceans. A blue whale calling off the coast of California might be heard by whales near Japan, 6,000 miles away. The Earth itself becomes part of their communication system, its geological features serving as amplifiers and waveguides for messages traveling through the deep. But migration is more than navigation and communication. The act of migration itself transforms ocean chemistry and shapes marine ecosystems in ways scientists are only beginning to understand. When whales descend to feed in deep waters, they consume vast quantities of krill, fish, and squid from the depths. Then they ascend to the surface to breathe, and they defecate. Whale feces are rich in iron and nitrogen, nutrients that are typically scarce in sunlit surface waters. These nutrients trigger phytoplankton blooms, explosions of microscopic plant life that form the base of ocean food webs. The blooms are so massive they can be seen from space, green swirls of life spreading across the ocean surface, drawing their energy from sunlight but dependent on nutrients delivered from below by whales. A single blue whale transfers approximately 3 tons of nutrients annually through this whale pump, bringing fertility from the sterile depths to the sunlit productive surface. The phytoplankton support zooplankton, which support fish, which support larger fish, seabirds, seals, and ultimately the whales themselves. The whales are not just participants in the ecosystem but architects of it. Their vertical movements connecting deep and shallow waters, their migrations spreading nutrients across vast horizontal distances. Remove the whales, and the ecosystem begins to collapse. Productivity declines, fish populations shrink. The presence of whales makes the ocean more alive, more productive, more diverse. This became dramatically apparent in 2015, when grey whale migration routes shifted by approximately 200 miles in response to changing ocean temperatures. Entire ecosystems followed. Fish populations moved, seabird colonies relocated, even benthic communities on the seafloor changed as whale feeding patterns shifted. The ancient migration routes are not just paths through water but highways that shape the distribution of life throughout the ocean. We often think of whales as individuals, or perhaps as species, but they are more than this. They are ecosystem engineers, creatures whose very presence and movement structure the environment around them, creating conditions that allow thousands of other species to thrive. Their migrations connect polar and tropical regions, surface and deep waters, and coastal and open ocean environments. They carry nutrients, energy, and genetic diversity across distances that span hemispheres. And they have been doing this for millions of years. Before humans existed, before civilization arose, before our ancestors descended from trees, whales were swimming these routes, following these pathways, shaping these ecosystems. The migrations we observe today are not merely annual events, but the continuation of patterns laid down in deep time, refined across epochs, tested and proven through countless generations. When we track a grey whale swimming south along the California coast, we are not watching a single animal making a journey. We are witnessing a living thread in a tapestry, woven over millennia, a pattern of movement so fundamental to ocean ecology that it helped create the marine world we know today. The whale is swimming through invisible rivers in the sea, following paths its ancestors discovered and perfected, guided by the Earth's magnetic field and temperature gradients, singing to companions thousands of miles away, pumping nutrients from depth to surface, connecting, always connecting, different parts of the ocean into a unified whole. The journey continues, as it has continued for longer than human memory extends, as it will continue as long as whales swim in our oceans. 12,000 miles, every year, every whale, following the ancient pathways through the endless blue, rivers flowing through the sea. The surface of the ocean is where we live, where light penetrates, where the familiar world exists. Below the surface, reality changes. Light fades, pressure increases, temperature drops. And yet, some creatures have mastered this hostile realm in ways that challenge everything we understand about the limits of mammalian life. Chief among these masters are the sperm whales, creatures that have transformed diving into an art form practiced at depths that would kill most living things in seconds. Watch a sperm whale prepare to dive. The preparation itself tells a story. The whale surfaces and breathes, but not casually, not with single breaths scattered across minutes. Instead, it breathes deliberately, 3 deep breaths in rapid succession, each one drawing in huge volumes of air, saturating its blood with oxygen. The hemoglobin in its blood binds oxygen with extraordinary efficiency, while myoglobin in its muscles stores additional oxygen reserves. In these 3 breaths, the whale is loading itself with enough oxygen to sustain life for 90 minutes underwater, 90 minutes without breathing, without any access to air. Then it dives. The enormous body arches, the tail flukes rise into the air, and the whale descends vertically into the blue. As it sinks deeper, the water pressure increases dramatically. At 100 meters, the pressure has doubled. At 200 meters, it has tripled. At 1,000 meters, where the sperm whale routinely hunts, the pressure has increased 100-fold. It is equivalent to having a weight of 10 tons pressing on every square meter of the whale's body. Under such pressure, air compresses. The whale's lungs, massive organs when inflated at the surface, compress to the size of a basketball. The air inside them is crushed into a fraction of its original volume. The nitrogen in that air dissolved into the blood under such tremendous pressure that it should form bubbles, deadly bubbles that cause the bends, decompression sickness, a condition that cripples human divers who ascend too quickly from much shallower depths. Yet the whale suffers no such fate. Evolution has equipped it with specialized proteins in its blood that prevent nitrogen bubbles from forming even under crushing pressure. Its rib cage is flexible, designed to collapse inward without breaking as the lungs compress. Blood flow reroutes away from collapsed lungs to active tissues that need oxygen. The whale's body elegantly solves physics problems that our best engineers struggle to address in submarine design. At 1,000 meters, sunlight has effectively disappeared. The whale has entered eternal twilight, a realm where only the faintest traces of surface light penetrate, where most animals either produce their own light or live in perpetual darkness. Here, the sperm whale begins to hunt, and its hunting method reveals engineering as sophisticated as anything in the natural world. The whale produces clicks, not random sounds, but precisely controlled acoustic pulses generated in structures within its massive head. These clicks are extraordinarily loud, reaching 230 decibels at the source. To understand this intensity, consider that sound above. 190 decibels can kill a human. The sperm whale's clicks are powerful enough to stun prey 6 feet away, potentially killing smaller fish outright through acoustic shock alone. But the clicks serve primarily as sonar, as echolocation. The whale emits 300 clicks per second when actively hunting, each click traveling outward through the water, bouncing off any object it encounters, returning to the whale as an echo. The whale's lower jaw acts as a receiving antenna, channeling these returning echoes to the inner ear through specialized fats that conduct sound with perfect clarity. From the timing and intensity of returning echoes, the whale constructs a 3-dimensional sound map of its surroundings. This sound map is more detailed than human vision. A hunting sperm whale can detect a 10-inch squid at ranges exceeding 1 mile. It can distinguish between species, between sizes, between individual animals. It navigates through total darkness with precision that makes human night vision seem crude. The acoustic image it perceives is so detailed that scientists believe sperm whales can possibly see inside their prey, detecting the squid's internal organs, its stomach contents, even the texture of its tissues, all through sound alone. In 2003, scientists managed to attach cameras to sperm whales, finally giving us a glimpse into the hunting behavior at depth. The footage revealed something unexpected. The whales hunt upside down. Swimming inverted through the abyss, they point their sonar downward, sweeping it like a searchlight through the darkness below them. This inverted posture apparently provides some advantage, perhaps better acoustic geometry, perhaps improved detection of prey against the faint light from above. Whatever the reason, it gives these massive predators an alien quality, enormous bodies hovering upside down in liquid space, their biological sonar probing the darkness beneath them. The prey they seek are giant squid, creatures of legend that grow to tremendous sizes. At depths of 2,900 meters, deeper than 8 Eiffel Towers stacked vertically, sperm whales battle these monsters in struggles we can only imagine. The evidence appears on the whale's skin afterward. Circular scars the size of dinner plates, sucker marks from giant squid tentacles, proof of combat in the crushing darkness of the abyss. Some whales carry dozens of these scars, testament to hundreds of battles fought in depths no human has ever witnessed directly. But even sperm whales do not hold the diving record. That distinction belongs to Cuvier's beaked whales, creatures less famous than sperm whales but even more extraordinary in their adaptations to depth. In 2014, scientists tagged a Cuvier's beaked whale that dove to 2,992 meters, nearly 3 kilometers beneath the surface, and remained submerged for 222 minutes, nearly 4 hours without breathing. Consider what this means. At 3,000 meters, the pressure equals 300 atmospheres. It is enough to compress air to the density of liquid. It would crush a human submarine. It is, quite literally, one of the most hostile environments on Earth, more extreme than most places in space, more deadly than the surface of most planets in our solar system. And this whale swims there casually, repeatedly, dozens of times throughout its life. To survive at such depths, the whale's physiology must perform feats that border on miraculous. Its heart rate drops to 2 beats per minute, an almost death-like slowness, conserving oxygen, reducing metabolic demand to levels that seem incompatible with active swimming and hunting. Its blood carries oxygen with efficiency far exceeding human blood, while its muscles store vast reserves of oxygen bound to myoglobin, present in concentrations 10 times higher than in terrestrial mammals. Most remarkably, its entire metabolism downshifts to operate on oxygen levels that would leave a human unconscious. The whale's body enters a state where it functions on less oxygen than a candle flame requires to burn, where every process has been optimized to extract maximum energy from minimum resources, where waste products are tolerated at levels that would poison other mammals. It is a state between normal life and suspended animation, a physiological mode that allows activity despite conditions that should not permit it. The whale's body structure itself represents a solution to impossible physics. At 300 atmospheres of pressure, a rigid structure would shatter. So the whale's skeleton is flexible, its ribs designed to fold inward without breaking, its lungs collapsing completely as air compresses beyond use. Air spaces that would implode become irrelevant as the whale's tissues take on the density of water, becoming nearly incompressible, becoming, in effect, part of the ocean itself, pressure equalizing throughout the body until external and internal forces balance. Even the whale's cells must cope with conditions that would destroy normal cellular function. Proteins that fold correctly at surface pressure would denature, would unfold and cease functioning at depth. But whale cells contain specialized proteins, modified amino acid sequences that remain stable under crushing force, that maintain their shapes and functions even when squeezed by pressures equivalent to several tons per square inch. These modified proteins keep cell membranes flexible, keep enzymes active, keep the molecular machinery of life operating under conditions that should halt all biochemical processes. Yet perhaps the most mysterious behavior of sperm whales occurs not at maximum depth, but at intermediate depths, around 600 meters. Scientists have observed sperm whales descending to this level, then stopping. They hang motionless in the water column, vertically oriented, heads up or heads down, suspended in the darkness like massive underwater monuments. They remain this way for hours, not feeding, not hunting, apparently not doing anything at all. They are sleeping. Sleeping while submerged, sleeping while holding their breath, sleeping in the middle of the water column with hundreds of meters of water above and below them. Their breathing stops, or nearly stops, reduced to unconscious rhythm that occurs every 20 minutes or so, just enough to maintain minimum oxygen levels. Their eyes close, or appear to close. Their bodies drift slightly with deep currents, but maintain vertical orientation, balanced somehow in the water column. This vertical sleeping posture has been documented in multiple sperm whale populations worldwide. Photographs show pods of whales arrayed like standing stones, floating in formation, each one vertical, each one motionless, each one apparently lost in dreams we cannot imagine. When they wake, they do so gradually, their echolocation clicks resuming slowly, their bodies beginning to move, consciousness returning from whatever depths of rest or dream their enormous brains descend to during sleep. What do they dream about, these creatures whose lives are so utterly different from our own? Do they dream of the hunt, of giant squid writhing in darkness? Do they dream of the surface, of breathing, of sunlight penetrating the water? Do they dream at all in ways we would recognize as dreaming? Or does their consciousness process experience in modes entirely alien to human understanding? Their brains suggest complexity we cannot fully grasp. A sperm whale's brain weighs 17 pounds, the largest brain of any animal ever to exist on Earth. It contains billions of neurons, vast cortical regions whose functions remain mysterious to neuroscience. The size alone suggests cognitive capacity of tremendous sophistication, capacity for processing, memory, perhaps thought itself, though what thoughts might occur in such a brain? Swimming through such depths remains forever beyond our knowing. What we do know is that these whales have mastered an environment that represents one of the final frontiers on Earth. Humans have walked on the moon, have sent robots to Mars, have probed the outer reaches of the solar system. Yet the deep ocean, the realm where sperm whales hunt casually, remains largely unexplored, largely unknown, more alien to us than the surface of any planet. We have better maps of Mars than of our own ocean floor. We have sent more people into space than into the deepest ocean trenches, but sperm whales go there every day, multiple times per day. They descend into crushing darkness, hunt by sound alone, hold their breath for longer than seems possible, survive pressures that would destroy any vehicle we could build, and return to the surface to breathe as casually as we might walk to a nearby store. They have transformed the impossible into the routine, the deadly into the daily, the alien into the familiar. They are masters of impossible depths, creatures that have solved problems we barely understand how to frame, that have adapted to extremes we can only experience through technology, that have made homes in places where we can never live. They carry within their bodies the solutions to engineering challenges that still baffle our best scientists. Solutions written not in blueprints but in genes, refined not through design but through millions of years of evolution, tested not in laboratories but in the crushing darkness of the abyss itself. And when they surface, when they blow that distinctive forward-angled spout into the air, when they breathe and float and rest in the sunlit waters we can see and understand, they carry with them memories of a world below, of battles fought in darkness, of prey caught in the crushing deep, of sleep suspended in the water column like dreams floating between the surface and the abyss. They are visitors from another realm, returning, briefly to ours, before descending once more into mysteries we can only imagine. In 1967, during the height of the Cold War, the United States Navy had deployed a global network of underwater listening devices. These hydrophones, positioned strategically across ocean basins, were designed to track Soviet submarines, to monitor the movement of vessels that might carry nuclear weapons through international waters. The operators who monitored these systems listened through headphones for hours each day, trained to distinguish between the mechanical sounds of propellers and engines and the natural sounds of the ocean itself. Then, one day, they heard something that changed everything, something that should not have existed according to any understanding of marine life at the time. They heard music, not simple calls or random sounds, but structured compositions with verses and choruses, with rhythmic patterns and melodic themes, with beginnings and middles and ends. The songs lasted up to 30 minutes, complex arrangements that repeated with variations that seemed to follow rules, that sounded unmistakably like deliberate creations. The sounds were being made by humpback whales. A marine biologist named Roger Payne obtained some of these recordings and began to analyze them with the tools of musicology as much as biology. What he discovered astonished the scientific community and would soon astonish the world. Humpback whale songs were not just vocalizations but genuine compositions, structured in ways that matched the fundamental principles of human music. They had phrases that combined into themes, themes that combined into songs, songs that could last half an hour and contain hundreds of distinct sounds arranged in specific orders. Each song consisted of multiple parts, like movements in a symphony. A typical song might begin with low, rumbling tones, progress through a series of higher-pitched phrases, incorporate trumpet-like sounds, and eerie rising wails, then conclude with a signature ending phrase before beginning again. The whales would repeat their songs multiple times, sometimes singing continuously for hours or even days, performing the same composition over and over with only minor variations. But perhaps most remarkably, all the male humpback whales in a region sang the same song. Not similar songs showing family resemblance, but identical songs, matching each other note for note. If you recorded a humpback whale off Australia and another whale 100 miles away, they would be singing the same song, synchronized across the ocean like members of a vast distributed choir. And the songs changed. Throughout a breeding season, which lasts several months, the song evolved. New phrases appeared, old phrases dropped out or were modified, the order of themes shifted. And all the whales in the region updated their songs together, in real time, maintaining synchronization even as the composition transformed. By the end of the breeding season, the song might be entirely different from how it began, yet at any given moment, every whale was singing the current version. In 1970, Roger Payne released an album called Songs of the Humpback Whale. It became one of the most successful natural history recordings ever produced, selling over 30 million copies. People around the world heard these songs and were transfixed by them. The sounds were otherworldly, yet somehow familiar, alien yet moving, incomprehensible yet beautiful. They spoke to something deep in human consciousness, a recognition perhaps that intelligence and creativity and beauty were not uniquely human attributes but existed throughout the natural world, in forms we were only beginning to understand. The recordings ignited what became known as the Save the Whales movement. Until that moment, whales had been seen primarily as resources, as sources of oil and meat and bone, as targets for industrial hunting. But hearing their songs, people began to perceive them differently. These were not just animals, but conscious beings, creatures with culture and communication, with something that resembled art. The moral case for their protection became overwhelming, and within a few years, conservation efforts that had struggled for decades gained unstoppable momentum. Scientists studying these songs discovered even more remarkable patterns. Different populations of humpback whales sing different dialects. Australian humpbacks perform 30-minute concerts with elaborate structures. Caribbean singers create 10-minute arrangements with different themes and patterns. Pacific populations have their own distinctive songs. Each region has its own musical tradition, its own style, recognizable to trained listeners as different as classical music is from jazz. Most astonishingly, songs spread between populations like cultural phenomena. A phrase that appears in Australian humpback songs will, within a few months, appear in songs recorded near Tonga, 3,000 miles away. From there, it might spread to Samoa, to the Cook Islands, traveling east across the Pacific, like a hit song spreading through human populations. Whales are listening to each other across vast distances, learning new musical phrases, incorporating them into their own songs, teaching them to others, creating a process of cultural transmission that spans entire ocean basins. This is not genetic. It is not instinctual. It is learned behavior, cultural evolution happening in real time, observable across seasons and years. Young male whales learn songs from adult males, not through any hardwired knowledge but through listening and practice, much as human children learn language. If a young whale grows up in Australia, it learns Australian songs. If relocated to the Caribbean, it would learn Caribbean songs. The music is transmitted through culture, through teaching and learning, through social bonds that connect individuals across space and time. But humpback songs, impressive as they are, represent only one form of whale communication. Sperm whales communicate in entirely different ways, using rhythmic click patterns called codas. These codas are short, sharp sounds arranged in specific rhythms: click, click, pause, click, or click, pause, click, click, click patterns that repeat and vary like Morse code. Each sperm whale has a unique click signature, a personal voice as distinctive as human vocal patterns. Scientists can identify individual whales from their clicks alone, can track specific animals across years and decades by recognizing their acoustic fingerprints. But beyond individual identity, the rhythms themselves carry meaning. Families of sperm whales share specific coda patterns, rhythmic signatures passed down through generations that identify which family group a whale belongs to. These family patterns group into larger dialects that define clans. Whales from the same clan, even if they have never met, share coda patterns that whales from other clans do not use. The dialects are so distinct that they define cultural groups within sperm whale populations, groups that do not interbreed despite sharing the same waters, groups that maintain their identity through sound patterns that serve as cultural markers. In 2021, artificial intelligence researchers analyzed 6 million sperm whale clicks recorded over multiple years. The AI identified 24 distinct sound units that combine in various patterns, creating what appears to be a phonetic alphabet. These units combine like words in sentences, creating messages whose meanings we do not yet understand but whose structure resembles language. The complexity suggests communication far more sophisticated than simple signaling, perhaps approaching symbolic thought, perhaps encoding information about locations, prey, threats, social relationships, experiences. If humpback songs are music, sperm whale codas might be conversation. Both represent complex communication systems that serve social functions, that bind groups together, that transmit information across individuals and generations. Both demonstrate cognitive capacities far beyond simple animal signaling, capacities for learning, for cultural transmission, for social coordination across vast distances. And then there are blue whales, whose communication operates on scales that dwarf even these impressive systems. Blue whales produce the lowest frequency calls made by any animal on Earth, rumbling tones that vibrate between 10 and 40 Hz, below the range of human hearing. We cannot hear these calls naturally, but with special equipment, we can record them, can analyze them, can track them across ocean basins. These infrasonic calls travel extraordinary distances. Sound at such low frequencies is not absorbed by water, but propagates through it with minimal loss, spreading horizontally for hundreds or even thousands of miles. A blue whale calling off the coast of California can be heard by hydrophones near Hawaii, 3,000 miles away. The calls travel through the deep sound channel, that layer of water where temperature and pressure create perfect acoustic conditions, and they spread across entire oceans. But scientists have discovered something even more extraordinary. Blue whale calls penetrate the seafloor itself. They vibrate through the rock and sediment of the ocean bottom, traveling through the Earth's crust as seismic waves. These waves can potentially reach whales on the opposite side of the planet, carrying messages through the solid body of the Earth itself. The whales are using the planet as a communication medium, are generating sounds powerful enough to make the Earth ring like a bell, are possibly speaking to each other through pathways that circumnavigate the globe. The mid-ocean ridges, those massive underwater mountain ranges that mark where tectonic plates pull apart, act as amplifiers for these calls. The geological structures channel and focus sound waves, creating acoustic hotspots where whale calls from different directions converge and mix. Blue whales may position themselves relative to these ridges to maximize the range and clarity of their calls, using Earth's own geography as an acoustic network a planetary-scale communications infrastructure built not by intelligence, but by geology, yet exploited by intelligence for purposes we barely understand. Among all these communicating whales, one has achieved a kind of tragic fame. The 52 Hz whale was first detected in 1989 by Navy hydrophones in the Pacific Ocean. Its call frequency measures 52 Hz, higher than any blue whale call, lower than any fin whale call, matching no known whale species. For over 30 years, hydrophones have tracked this whale as it roams the Pacific alone, calling at its unique frequency, receiving no answers. Scientists called it the loneliest whale in the world. Its story captured public imagination, spawning documentaries, articles, even music composed in its honor. The whale became a symbol of isolation, of being unable to communicate, of calling out and never being heard. People identified with it, saw in its solitary wandering their own experiences of loneliness and disconnection. But recent research suggests the story may be more complex. Analysis of recorded calls shows that other whales sometimes respond at or near the 52 Hz frequency, suggesting that perhaps this whale is not completely isolated after all. Perhaps other whales can hear it and do respond, though not at the same frequency. Perhaps it is not alone but simply different, swimming through the ocean in its own way, calling in its own voice, existing as an individual in a social species, isolated perhaps, but not necessarily lonely in ways we imagine. The truth is, we do not fully understand whale communication. We hear their sounds, record them, analyze them, identify patterns and structures. But what these sounds mean to the whales themselves, what information they convey, what emotions or thoughts or experiences they represent, remains largely mysterious. We are like listeners who hear a foreign language and recognize it as language but cannot understand what is being said. Yet even in our incomplete understanding, we can recognize sophistication. Whale songs contain mathematical ratios found in human music, the golden ratio, Fibonacci sequences, harmonic intervals that human composers have discovered independently and that apparently represent universal principles of acoustic beauty. The whales are not imitating human music. Humans and whales have separately discovered the same mathematical relationships produce pleasing sounds, suggesting that beauty itself may follow universal laws written into the physics of sound waves and the biology of hearing. When we listen to whale songs, we are hearing the artistic productions of minds profoundly different from our own, yet recognizably sophisticated. We are hearing communication systems that serve social purposes. We understand mate attraction, group coordination, individual identification, but that operate with complexity approaching human language. We are hearing sounds that have traveled through the ocean for millions of years, that have shaped whale societies and whale cultures, that connect individuals across distances we can barely imagine, that turn the entire ocean into a medium of connection where no whale need ever be truly alone, where calls and songs and clicks spread through the water, carrying messages through the darkness, linking lives across the vast blue spaces, creating networks of sound that span hemispheres. The ocean is not silent. It never has been. It rings with voices, with music, with conversations we can detect but not fully comprehend. Whales fill it with sound, transform it into a living medium of communication where information flows not at the speed of light, but at the speed of sound, through water, slower but no less effective, connecting singers and listeners across evolutionary time and geographical space. And they have been doing this far longer than we have existed. While our ancestors were still learning to make fire, whales were singing these songs. While we built our first cities, whales were teaching these songs to their young. While we developed writing and mathematics and science, whales continued their underwater symphonies, unchanged in their essential nature, refined across millions of years into forms we are only now beginning to appreciate. Their songs circle the earth, traveling through channels in the deep, bouncing off underwater mountains, penetrating the seafloor, spreading across basins that span continents. They are voices in the darkness, calling, answering, singing, speaking in languages older than humanity, carrying messages whose full meaning we may never fully understand, but whose existence we can no longer deny. The whales are talking. They have always been talking. We are only now learning to listen. The relationship between humans and whales has been written in blood across centuries. It is a story that begins in violence and ends, or perhaps begins again, in wonder. But the journey from one to the other required humanity to transform its entire conception of what whales are and what our responsibilities toward them might be. In the 19th century, whaling was not merely an industry but a force that drove global exploration. Ships from Nantucket, from New Bedford, from ports across Europe and Asia ventured into the remotest waters on Earth in pursuit of whales. These voyages lasted years, carrying men into Antarctic ice fields, across the equator dozens of times, through storms and calms and dangers we can barely imagine from our comfortable modern perspective. The whalers were not merely hunters, but explorers, cartographers, oceanographers, despite having no such formal training. They created maps of ocean currents that remain accurate today. They documented wind patterns, water temperatures, seasonal variations in sea conditions. They discovered islands, charted coastlines, recorded the distribution of marine life across the globe. Much of what we knew about the ocean before the age of scientific oceanography came from whaling logs, from observations made by men who spent years at sea, who learned to read the ocean through necessity and experience. The whalers were, in a very real sense, our first global observers of marine systems, though their purpose was extraction rather than understanding. And extract they did, with efficiency that accelerated through the decades. By the early 20th century, the Industrial Revolution had transformed whaling from a dangerous hunt involving small boats and hand-thrown harpoons into mechanized slaughter on a scale previously unimaginable. Factory ships the size of floating cities processed whales aboard, allowing fleets to remain at sea for months, hunting in the richest waters near Antarctica where whale populations congregated to feed. In 1926, a Norwegian inventor developed the electromagnetic harpoon, a weapon that exploded inside the whale's body, killing it in minutes rather than the hours that old-style harpoons required. This innovation industrialized death, made it efficient, turned whaling into an assembly line process. At peak efficiency, factory ships could process one whale every 12 minutes. The bodies were flensed, the blubber boiled for oil, the bones ground for fertilizer, the meat frozen for markets. Nothing was wasted except the whale itself. The numbers are almost incomprehensible. By 1930, humans had killed approximately 300,000 blue whales, reducing the largest animals ever to exist on Earth, from a global population estimated at 350,000 to fewer than 1,000 individuals. In just a few decades, we brought them to the edge of extinction. Humpback whales, grey whales, right whales, all suffered similar devastation. Entire populations disappeared. Some species became so rare that years might pass between sightings. The ocean began to change in ways that initially went unnoticed. Whale populations that had shaped marine ecosystems for millions of years suddenly vanished. The nutrients they transported, the prey they consumed, the predators they supported, the ecological roles they filled all disappeared. The ocean became, in a very real sense, less alive. Productivity declined, food webs simplified. The complexity that whales had helped maintain for epochs began to unravel. Yet even as the slaughter continued, something else was happening. A few voices began to question whether this destruction was necessary, whether it was moral, whether humanity had the right to eliminate species that had existed for millions of years. These voices were initially few and easily ignored by an industry that employed thousands and generated enormous profits. But they persisted, and gradually they grew louder. The transformation began in earnest in 1970. Walter Hickel, serving as Secretary of the Interior under President Nixon, attended a presentation by Roger Payne featuring recordings of humpback whale songs. Hickel, a former Alaska governor not known for environmental sensitivity, listened to those songs and was profoundly moved. Shortly afterward, he placed whales under federal protection, one of the first major political acts to recognize whales as something more than resources, as beings worthy of protection for their own sake. That same year, Roger Payne released his album Songs of the Humpback Whale to the public. The impact was immediate and profound. Millions of people heard whale songs for the first time and recognized in them something that transcended simple animal vocalization. The song spoke to something deep in human consciousness, evoked emotions that connected listeners to these creatures in ways that facts and statistics never could. The whales were no longer just animals but singers, artists, beings with whom we might share some common ground of experience or emotion. Public opinion began to shift. Conservation organizations that had struggled for decades to generate interest in whale protection suddenly found themselves riding a wave of popular support. The Save the Whales movement became a cultural phenomenon, particularly among young people, who adopted whales as symbols of environmental consciousness, of humanity's obligation to protect rather than destroy the natural world. In 1975, the environmental organization Greenpeace launched a campaign that would define modern environmental activism. They sailed small inflatable boats called Zodiacs directly between Soviet whaling vessels and the whales those vessels were hunting. As the whalers prepared to fire their harpoons, the activists positioned themselves in the line of fire, making it impossible to kill the whales without killing the protesters first. Cameras captured every moment, creating dramatic footage that was broadcast worldwide, showing young people risking their lives to protect whales, showing the enormity of whaling ships next to tiny inflatable boats, showing the courage required to confront industrial slaughter with nothing but physical presence and moral conviction. The images created the first major environmental media sensation of the television age. Public outrage grew. Protests erupted outside Soviet and Japanese embassies. Political pressure mounted on governments that still permitted whaling. The industry, which had operated for decades with minimal public awareness or concern, suddenly found itself under intense scrutiny, its practices questioned, its legitimacy challenged. The diplomatic battle culminated at the International Whaling Commission, an industrial organization originally created to manage whale hunting, to ensure it remained sustainable, meaning profitable, indefinitely. Through the 1970s and early 80s, conservation groups worked to shift the Commission's purpose from management to protection, from sustainable use to complete prohibition. It was slow, frustrating work, requiring diplomatic maneuvering across dozens of countries with conflicting interests and values. Finally, in 1986, the International Whaling Commission voted to ban commercial whaling worldwide. It was a landmark moment, one of the first times the international community agreed to prohibit the exploitation of a natural resource, not because it was unprofitable, but because it was morally wrong. The ban remains in effect today, though imperfectly enforced and regularly challenged. Japan, Norway, and Iceland continued whaling under scientific research permits, a loophole in the ban that allowed them to kill whales ostensibly for research purposes while selling the meat commercially. Over the following decades, these three nations killed approximately 15,000 whales, undermining the ban even as most nations respected it. The practice generated ongoing controversy, protests, diplomatic tensions that persist to the present day. But despite these violations, the ban had profound effects. Whale populations began to recover. Slowly at first, Then, with increasing momentum as decades passed and more whales survived to reproductive age, the ocean began, tentatively, to heal. Modern conservation efforts employ technologies that would have seemed like science fiction to 19th century whalers. Satellites track individual whales in real time as they migrate across ocean basins, providing data on movement patterns, diving behavior, habitat use. Drones fly above whales, photographing them from above, collecting breath samples from their blowholes to analyze stress hormones, pregnancy status, genetic information, even dietary composition. The health of individual whales can be monitored without ever touching them, without causing them stress or harm. Artificial intelligence analyzes thousands of photographs uploaded by whale watchers worldwide, identifying individual whales from their unique markings, tracking where they appear and when, building a global database of whale movements and relationships. The website Happy Whale has identified over 300,000 individual whales through citizen science, creating a resource that would have been impossible without public participation and computer analysis. The recovery has been remarkable in some cases. Humpback populations have rebounded from approximately 5,000 individuals in the 1960s to over 80,000 today, a 16-fold increase representing one of conservation's great success stories. Grey whales, driven to the edge of extinction twice in their history, recovered both times, demonstrating extraordinary resilience. Southern right whales have increased at approximately 7% annually for 30 years, growing from a few hundred to several thousand individuals. These recoveries demonstrate what conservation can achieve when political will, public support, and scientific knowledge align. They show that even severe damage can be reversed, that populations reduced to dangerous lows can recover if given time and protection. They offer hope that the destruction we inflicted might not be permanent, that we possess the capacity to repair at least some of what we have broken. Yet the recovery is incomplete, and in some cases, barely begun. North Atlantic right whales hover at approximately 360 individuals, so few that every death threatens the population's survival. Ship strikes kill dozens annually, fishing gear entangles others, causing slow deaths by starvation or infection. Despite intense conservation efforts, the population continues to decline, each a year, bringing them closer to a point from which recovery may become impossible. The vaquita porpoise, the smallest cetacean species, numbers fewer than 10 individuals, driven to the edge of extinction by illegal fishing practices in the Gulf of California. Conservation efforts have failed to halt the decline. Extinction appears inevitable, a tragedy unfolding in real time despite international attention and resources devoted to prevention. Ship strikes remain a massive problem worldwide, killing an estimated 20,000 whales annually. As global shipping has increased, as vessels have grown larger and faster, collisions have become more frequent. Whales surfacing in shipping lanes have no time to avoid vessels traveling at speeds that exceed anything they evolved to detect or evade. They are struck, often killed instantly, sometimes mortally wounded and left to die slowly from internal injuries. Climate change presents new challenges. As ocean temperatures rise, currents shift, prey species move to different latitudes. Whales that rely on specific feeding grounds may find those areas no longer productive. Migration routes followed for millions of years may no longer lead to abundant food. The ocean is changing faster than whales can adapt, creating pressures they have never encountered in their evolutionary history. The story of humanity and whales is not finished. We have moved from slaughter to protection, from seeing them as resources to recognizing them as beings deserving of existence for their own sake. But recognition alone does not ensure survival. The challenges they face now are more complex than the simple violence of harpoons. They are the challenges of a changing world, of human activities that harm without intending to, of an ocean transformed by our presence. Even as we try to minimize our impact, salvation remains unfinished. The work of conservation continues, requiring vigilance, resources, political will that must be maintained across generations. Every whale that survives, every calf that grows to adulthood, every population that increases, represents a small victory in a larger struggle to preserve not just whales but the ocean itself, to maintain the complexity and beauty and profound mystery that whales embody. They survived our worst. The question now is whether they can survive our best, whether our attempts to protect them will prove sufficient against the larger forces of environmental change that even our most determined efforts struggle to address. The answer will be written in the ocean, in the years to come, in the presence or absence of voices singing through the deep. The human brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons, cells that process information, store memories, generate thoughts and emotions, and consciousness itself. We consider our brains the pinnacle of cognitive evolution, the organs that make us unique among Earth's creatures. Yet when we examine whale brains, we discover structures and capabilities that challenge our assumptions about intelligence, about consciousness, about what minds can be. Whales possess spindle neurons, specialized brain cells, that were long thought to be unique to humans and great apes. These neurons are large, elongated cells found in specific brain regions associated with social cognition, empathy, and emotional processing. They allow rapid communication across different brain areas, enabling quick integration of complex social and emotional information. In humans, spindle neurons are thought to underlie our capacity for empathy, for understanding others' mental states, for the social and emotional intelligence that makes human society possible. Humpback whales have more spindle neurons than humans. Their brains contain these specialized cells in greater numbers and higher densities than our own. What this means for whale cognition remains unclear, but it suggests capacities for social and emotional processing that may equal or exceed human abilities. When we watch whales interact, engage in complex social behaviors, maintain relationships across years and distances, we may be observing emotional and social intelligence as sophisticated as our own, expressed in forms we struggle to recognize because they are so different from human expressions. But whale brains contain more than just familiar structures in unfamiliar quantities. They possess entire regions absent in other mammals, particularly in the paralimbic system, the brain areas involved in processing emotions and social information. These unique structures suggest that whales experience forms of consciousness we cannot yet comprehend, that their subjective experience of the world may include dimensions entirely foreign to human consciousness. Consider what this might mean. If whale brains possess structures that human brains lack, they may be capable of experiences we cannot imagine, thoughts we cannot think, emotions we cannot feel. Their consciousness may be as different from ours as color is from sound, impossible to fully translate or understand because we lack the neural architecture to experience what they experience. We may be, in a very real sense, speaking with minds that operate according to principles we have yet to discover. Yet despite these differences, we occasionally glimpse commonalities that suggest shared ground between human and whale consciousness. In 2018, a humpback whale off the coast of the Cook Islands did something extraordinary. A marine biologist named Nan Hauser was in the water photographing whales when a 15-foot tiger shark appeared, moving toward her with clear predatory intent. Tiger sharks are among the ocean's most dangerous predators, opportunistic hunters that attack anything they perceive as potential prey, including humans. Before the shark could reach her, a humpback whale intervened. The enormous animal, weighing approximately 40 tons, positioned itself between Hauser and the shark. When Hauser tried to swim away, the whale followed, using its massive pectoral flipper to gently but firmly push her back, tucking her under its fin, shielding her with its body. This continued for 10 minutes, the whale actively protecting Hauser from the shark, repeatedly positioning itself between her and danger, using its flipper to guide her towards safety. Eventually, the shark left. The whale, apparently satisfied that the danger had passed, swam away. Hauser was left trembling, overwhelmed by what had occurred. The whale had no obvious reason to help her. She represented no benefit to it, no resource, no advantage. The whale had intervened purely to protect another creature from harm, demonstrating cross-species empathy that challenges our understanding of animal cognition and morality. This was not an isolated incident. Similar stories exist of dolphins protecting swimmers from sharks, of whales supporting injured humans at the surface, of cetaceans intervening to help creatures they have no evolutionary relationship with and no obvious reason to assist. These behaviors suggest that empathy, the capacity to recognize and respond to the suffering of others, may not be uniquely human, but a general feature of sophisticated social mammals, perhaps an inevitable consequence of the kind of complex social intelligence that large brains enable. Whale cultures run deeper than simple learned behaviors. Orcas, also called killer whales despite being the ocean's largest dolphins, have maintained distinct hunting traditions for 700,000 years. We know this because these cultural differences are visible in their DNA. Different orca groups, called ecotypes, have genetic signatures showing they have not interbred for hundreds of thousands of years despite sharing the same waters, despite being physically capable of interbreeding. They maintain their separation through culture, through learned behaviors and traditions that define group identity as effectively as any physical barrier. Southern resident orcas eat only salmon, specializing in Chinook salmon to such a degree that they will ignore abundant other fish species to hunt their preferred prey. Transient orcas hunt marine mammals, seals, sea lions, even other whales, using cooperative hunting techniques passed down through generations. Offshore orcas target sharks, using specialized techniques to flip sharks upside down, inducing a state called tonic immobility that allows the orcas to eat the shark's livers while avoiding their teeth. Each group speaks its own language, uses its own dialect of calls and clicks that members of other groups do not use or understand. Computer analysis of orca vocalizations shows that the languages spoken by different ecotypes are mutually incomprehensible, as different from each other as human languages from different language families. Orcas from different cultures cannot understand each other, despite belonging to the same species, despite possessing the same cognitive capabilities. Culture divides them more effectively than genetics, creating isolated populations that maintain their traditions across evolutionary timescales. Bowhead whales, living in Arctic waters, can survive over 200 years. Some individuals alive today were born before the American Civil War, have witnessed nearly a quarter of a millennium of ocean history. Remarkably, some of these whales carry harpoon points in their blubber from the 1800s, stone and metal points that were embedded during hunting attempts over a century ago, that have remained in their bodies ever since. Testament to survival, to resilience, to lives spanning time periods we struggle to comprehend. What knowledge might such a whale possess? What has it learned over 2 centuries of life? What has it witnessed? What changes has it seen? What understanding has it accumulated? If whales possess cultural memory, if they transmit knowledge across generations, these ancient individuals might carry information spanning human lifetimes, might remember ocean conditions from before industrial fishing, before global shipping, before the modern transformation of marine environments. They are living libraries, repositories of experience and knowledge we have no way to access, no means to translate into forms we could understand. Yet perhaps the most profound mysteries lie in whale behavior that seems to defy rational explanation. Mass strandings occur regularly worldwide, events where dozens or even hundreds of healthy whales beach themselves simultaneously, swimming deliberately into shallow water, where they become trapped by receding tides, where they die slowly from overheating or organ collapse under their own weight. Rescuers push them back to sea, and often they return immediately, driving themselves back onto the beach as though determined to die. Scientists have identified multiple potential causes. Solar storms disrupt Earth's magnetic field, potentially confusing whale navigation systems that rely on magnetic sensing. Military sonar, particularly mid-frequency active sonar used by navies to detect submarines, can cause whales to rapidly surface, leading to decompression sickness, internal bleeding, panic that drives them towards shore. Magnetic anomalies on the seafloor, areas where local magnetic fields deviate from expected patterns, might draw whales off course, leading them into dangerous shallow waters. But no single explanation accounts for all strandings. Some occur in areas with no magnetic anomalies, during periods of no solar activity, with no military exercises nearby. Some involve species that do not rely heavily on magnetic navigation. Some occur with such regularity in specific locations that they seem almost ritualistic, as though the whales are following some imperative we cannot detect or understand. One hypothesis proposes that terminally ill whales beach themselves deliberately, that they possess awareness of their own impending death and choose to die on shore rather than sink into the abyss. Pod members, seeing a leader or family member heading towards shore, follow from loyalty or social bonds stronger than self-preservation instincts. It is a controversial idea, suggesting death awareness in non-human animals, but observations of whale behavior lend it some support. Whales support injured pod members at the surface for days, taking turns to push them up to breathe, refusing to abandon them even when the injured whale has no hope of recovery. Mothers carry dead calves for weeks, balancing them on their heads, diving and resurfacing with the bodies, traveling hundreds of miles while bearing this burden, refusing to let go even as the calf decomposes. These behaviors suggest grieving, mourning, emotional responses to death that parallel human responses. Scientists have documented what appears to be ritual behavior around dying companions. Whales gather around a dying individual, touching it with their flippers, vocalizing continuously, maintaining vigil as it weakens and eventually stops breathing. After death, they remain with the body for hours or days, circling it, sometimes pushing it gently, as though checking for signs of life, as though unable or unwilling to accept that their companion is gone. Do whales understand death? Do they possess concepts of mortality, of the transition from life to not life, of the permanence of loss? We cannot know with certainty, but their behavior suggests emotional and perhaps spiritual dimensions we have barely begun to investigate. They act as though death matters to them, as though the loss of individuals affects the group in ways that transcend simple disruption of social structure. They seem to mourn, and mourning implies understanding, implies recognition that something profound and irreversible has occurred. These mysteries accumulate, unanswered questions that point toward consciousness, intelligence operating according to principles we have yet to map. Whale brains are not simply larger versions of human brains, but different architectures entirely, shaped by evolution to solve different problems, to process different kinds of information, to exist in an environment so unlike ours that the very nature of experience must be transformed. They live in three-dimensional space, able to move up and down as easily as forward and backward. They navigate by sound in perpetual or partial darkness. They exist in social groups whose membership changes fluidly across vast distances. They communicate across hundreds or thousands of miles. They experience the ocean as a medium that carries sound and smell and pressure and temperature, a rich sensory environment we can barely imagine because our senses are so differently tuned. What is it like to be a whale? The philosopher Thomas Nagel famously asked what it is like to be a bat, arguing that subjective experience is fundamentally inaccessible across species boundaries, that we can never truly know what another creature experiences because we cannot escape our own perceptual and cognitive frameworks. If this is true for bats, how much more true must it be for whales, whose lives are so vastly different from ours, whose brains contain structures we lack, whose senses operate in ranges we cannot perceive? Yet we glimpse commonalities, They care for their young with devotion that looks like love. They maintain relationships that look like friendship. They mourn losses that look like grief. They help others in distress, even others unlike themselves, in ways that look like compassion. They create beauty, transmit culture, learn and teach and remember across lifetimes. They demonstrate capacities we once believed were uniquely human, forcing us to expand our understanding of what minds can be, what consciousness might encompass, what forms intelligence and emotion, and perhaps even wisdom, can take in beings whose Palswell face. Existence is so different from our own, yet somehow, mysteriously, recognizably similar in ways that matter most. There are places in the ocean where the boundary between species seems to thin, where something fundamental shifts in the relationship between humans and whales. The tropical lagoons of Baja California are such places, warm, shallow waters that grey whales have travelled to for millennia, where mothers come to give birth and nurse their calves in safety, far from the cold feeding grounds of the north, far from predators that might threaten their vulnerable young. In these lagoons, something extraordinary happens. Grey whale mothers, animals weighing 30 to 40 tons, capable of swimming across entire oceans, approach small boats filled with humans. They do not flee, they do not show fear or aggression. Instead, they float motionlessly beside the boats, allowing people to reach out and touch them, to place hands on their massive heads, to make contact across the species boundary. Their calves, curious and playful, swim even closer, sometimes pushing their heads out of the water to be stroked, actively seeking interaction with these strange creatures who smell of land and air and a world the whales will never know. Why do they do this? Grey whales were hunted to near extinction twice in their history. They have every reason to fear humans, to avoid us, to pass their caution down through generations as a survival trait. Yet in these lagoons, that fear seems to vanish. The whales approach voluntarily, deliberately, choosing contact. Some researchers believe the whales remember, somehow, that humans helped them, that conservation efforts saved them from extinction. And this is their acknowledgement, their gratitude. Others think the whales are simply curious, that their intelligence leads them to investigate anything unusual in their environment. Perhaps it is both, or neither, or something we cannot name because we lack the framework to understand what motivates them. The water in these lagoons holds perfect conditions for rest and nursing. The temperature hovers around 28 degrees Celsius, warm enough that even newborn calves maintain their body heat without excessive energy expenditure. The depth is shallow enough to provide protection from large predators but deep enough for whales to maneuver comfortably. The salinity provides buoyancy that supports the enormous bodies with minimal effort, allowing the whales to rest, to float, to conserve energy for the long journey back to feeding grounds that will begin in a few months. Grey whale mothers fast throughout their time in these lagoons. From the moment they leave the feeding grounds until they return, spanning 8 months or more, they eat nothing. They live entirely on the blubber reserves they accumulated during summer feeding, metabolizing their own body fat to fuel their metabolism, to produce milk for their calves, to sustain life during this extended period without food. By the time they return north, mothers have lost 40% of their body weight, transformed from robust, well-fed animals to emaciated shadows of their former selves. They will feed desperately throughout the summer, consuming tons of small crustaceans to rebuild their reserves before the next breeding season begins the cycle again. The milk they produce during this fast is extraordinary. It is not like the thin milk of cows or humans, but thick as toothpaste. 35% fat, so energy-dense that it fuels growth unmatched by any terrestrial mammal. Calves gain 100 pounds per day, doubling their birth weight in weeks, transforming from vulnerable newborns into animals large enough and strong enough to survive the migration north. The milk is so thick that calves must work to extract it, nudging their mother's mammary glands, stimulating milk release, feeding for brief intense periods throughout the day and night. Humpback mothers undergo similar privations. They too fast for months while nursing, producing hundreds of gallons of milk that drains their energy reserves, that transforms their bodies from robust to skeletal. They too lose massive amounts of weight, sacrificing themselves to ensure their calves survive. It is a strategy that makes sense only when you consider the geography of their lives. Food is abundant in cold polar waters, but absent in warm tropical breeding grounds, so they feed where food exists and breed where conditions favor newborn survival, accepting the metabolic cost as necessary for their calves' success. But if whales are active and engaged during their waking hours, their sleep reveals an entirely different side of their existence. Sperm whales sleep in ways that seem almost alien to our experience. They form sleeping pods, groups of 5 to 10 individuals, and they sleep vertically in the water column. Their enormous bodies, 40 to 50 feet long, float upright like standing stones, heads near the surface or pointing downward into darkness, perfectly still, suspended in the water as though frozen in time. They remain in this vertical position for hours. They do not swim, do not move, appear entirely unconscious, yet they maintain their orientation, remain together as a group, somehow coordinate their rest even while their minds are elsewhere. Scientists discovered this behavior only recently, capturing it with underwater photography and remote sensing, revealing a phenomenon that earlier researchers never suspected because it occurs far from shore, in deep water, during periods when humans rarely observe whales. Why vertical? No one knows with certainty. Perhaps it minimizes energy expenditure, allowing the whales to hover without effort. Perhaps it relates to breathing, keeping their blowholes near the surface while their bodies extend into deeper water. Perhaps it serves some function we cannot guess because we do not understand the full constraints of living as an air-breathing mammal in the ocean. But the image of these massive predators sleeping upright in the deep has captured scientific and public imagination, adding another layer to our understanding of how different whale lives are from anything in our experience. And they dream. Scientists monitoring sleeping sperm whales have observed rapid eye movements beneath closed eyelids, the same REM sleep that in humans correlates with dreaming. Their bodies twitch occasionally with phantom movements, muscles firing in patterns that do not correspond to their current stillness. Their echolocation clicks fire randomly, without the organized patterns of active hunting, like sleep talkers murmuring fragments of conversation that make no sense to listeners. What do they dream about? Do they dream of the hunt, of giant squid writhing in darkness, of the satisfaction of a successful dive? Do they dream of their pods, of social interactions and relationships that define their waking lives? Do they replay memories, process experiences, consolidate learning as human dreams apparently do? Or are their dreams entirely unlike ours, processing information in ways that reflect their different brains, their different experiences, their different form of consciousness? We can observe that they dream but never know the content of those dreams. We can see their eyes moving, their bodies twitching, but we cannot access their subjective experience, cannot peer into their sleeping minds, to discover what narratives or images or sensations occupy their consciousness while they float in the darkness. It is one of the ultimate boundaries of scientific knowledge. We can study behavior, analyze brain activity, map neural structures, but subjective experience remains forever beyond our reach, private, inaccessible, the final mystery that each consciousness keeps to itself. Blue whales sleep differently. They rest horizontally at the surface, their massive bodies floating on the boundary between water and air, their breathing synchronized with the rhythm of ocean swells. Each rise and fall of the waves corresponds to a breath, the whale rising to inhale as the swell lifts it, sinking slightly as the wave passes. Their heartbeat slows during sleep, dropping from 20 or 30 beats per minute during active swimming, to as few as 4 or 6 beats per minute during deep rest, a pace so slow it seems incompatible with maintaining consciousness, yet they continue to breathe, to respond to changes in their environment, to maintain some level of awareness, even in sleep. This is the nature of cetacean sleep, never complete, never total, always maintaining enough awareness to swim to the surface and breathe, to avoid predators, to remain oriented in 3-dimensional space. Parts of their brains sleep while other parts remain active, a phenomenon called unihemispheric sleep, where one brain hemisphere rests while the other maintains vigilance. They are simultaneously awake and asleep, conscious and unconscious, alert and resting, existing in a state that splits the difference between the binary states that most mammals experience. At sunset in the San Juan Islands, off the coast of Washington state, orcas gather in greeting ceremonies that researchers have documented for decades. Pods that have been separated for hours or days converge from different directions, swimming purposefully toward a meeting place that seems to be decided through communication we cannot hear. When they meet, they engage in elaborate social displays, touching each other with their pectorals and flukes, rubbing against one another, vocalizing continuously, creating a cacophony of sound that carries through the water for miles. These gatherings serve no obvious survival function. The orcas are not hunting together, not sharing food, not engaging in any practical activity. They are simply greeting each other, renewing social bonds, celebrating reunion. After 20 minutes or an hour, the ceremony ends and the pods separate, moving off in different directions to hunt or rest or travel. The greeting ceremony is purely social, purely about relationships, about maintaining the connections that bind the community together, even when individuals are separated by distance or time. Pilot whales form nursery groups where multiple females nurse any calf, regardless of whether that calf is their biological offspring. This communal motherhood ensures that no baby goes hungry, that even if a mother dies or cannot produce sufficient milk, her calf will survive, because other females will feed it. It is cooperation that transcends individual genetic interest, that benefits the group even at cost to individuals, that demonstrates social bonds strong enough to override the evolutionary imperative to favor one's own offspring above others. In the deep Pacific, beaked whales perform spiral dives in perfect synchronization, their bodies creating helical patterns through the water as they descend into darkness. Multiple whales dive together, maintaining precise spacing, rotating as they descend, creating geometric forms that scientists have observed but cannot explain. Are they hunting cooperatively, using their coordinated movements to herd prey? Are they engaged in some form of social display, demonstrating coordination and group cohesion? Are they playing, engaging in behavior that serves no practical purpose except perhaps enjoyment or practice? We observe the spirals but cannot penetrate their meaning, cannot determine what purpose they serve in whale society or whale consciousness. These moments of tenderness and mystery, scattered across the world's oceans, scattered across species and situations, reveal dimensions of whale life that transcend mere survival. They show us beings who rest and dream, who greet and celebrate, who cooperate and care for each other in ways that speak to emotional lives as rich and complex as our own. They show us that beneath the bowfowls, waves exists not just a habitat filled with animals, but a parallel world of consciousness, where different minds experience existence in different ways, but share with us the fundamental experiences that make life meaningful: rest and wakefulness, connection and separation, care and loss, the rhythms that shape all sentient existence. When a grey whale mother floats peacefully in a Baja lagoon, her calf nestled beside her, both resting in warm water after the long journey south, we see more than biology, more than behavior, more than evolutionary adaptation. We see something we recognize, something that connects their experience to ours across all the differences of form and habitat and evolutionary history. We see peace, contentment, the quiet satisfaction of safety and rest after hardship. We see motherhood, the bond between parent and offspring that seems to be written into the nature of mammalian life, regardless of whether that life unfolds on land or in water. When sperm whales sleep vertically in the deep, their enormous bodies suspended like monuments in liquid space, we see vulnerability and trust. These are predators who fear nothing when awake, who hunt in crushing darkness, who battle giant squid and win. Yet in sleep, they are defenseless, unconscious, dependent on each other for safety, on their podmates who sleep nearby, on the coordination that keeps them together, even when individual awareness fades. They trust each other enough to sleep, to surrender consciousness, to accept vulnerability in exchange for necessary rest. When orcas gather at sunset to greet each other, touching and vocalizing in ceremonies that serve no survival function, we see joy perhaps, or something like it. We see the pleasure of reunion, the celebration of relationship, the acknowledgement that others matter, that connection itself has value beyond any practical benefit it provides. We see social bonds maintained deliberately, consciously, through ritual and repeated contact, through behaviors that say, "You are important to me," in the only language these particular beings can speak. These are not simple animals operating on instinct, mindlessly following genetic programming. These are conscious beings making choices, maintaining relationships, experiencing emotions, existing in ways that resemble our own existence, enough that we can recognize kinship across the vast differences that separate us. They are not us, will never be us, should not be measured only by how much they resemble us. But they are like us in ways that matter, in ways that create moral obligations, in ways that demand we treat them not as resources or obstacles, but as fellow inhabitants of this planet, as creatures whose existence has value in itself, whose experiences are real and meaningful to them, whose lives deserve protection and respect, not because they benefit us, but because they are, in the most profound sense, worthy of existence. The lagoons of Baja, the sleeping pods in deep water, the sunset gatherings and nursery groups and spiral dives. These are where giants dream, where they rest and connect and experience whatever it is they experience in the private spaces of their consciousness. These are the moments when they are most themselves, most fully realized as the being's evolution has made them, most removed from our influence and observation and interference. We are privileged, extraordinarily privileged, to witness even fragments of these moments. We are fortunate that some whales choose to approach us, to let us touch them, to share space with us despite our history of violence toward them. We are lucky that technology allows us to observe sleeping whales, to track their movements, to analyze their sounds, to piece together understanding of lives lived entirely in a medium we can visit only briefly before we must return to air and land. And in witnessing these moments, in accumulating this understanding, we take on responsibility. Knowledge creates obligation. To know that whales dream means we must consider the value of those dreams. To know that they grieve means we must consider the cost of causing them loss. To know that they cooperate and care for each other means we must consider the damage we do when we separate them, when we disrupt their social structures, when we force them to adapt to a world increasingly shaped by human activity. The giants dream beneath the waves, in warm lagoons and deep water, in pods and alone, in sleep and wakefulness. Their dreams are their own, forever inaccessible to us, forever private. But that they dream at all, that they rest and sleep and perhaps experience something like the dreams that visit our own sleeping minds, this alone should give us pause. It should make us consider what we share with these beings, should remind us that consciousness exists in many forms, that experience is not unique to humanity, that the ocean holds minds as real and as valuable as our own, minds that deserve the space to rest, to dream, to exist in peace. The peaceful breathing of whales in the lagoons creates ripples that spread across miles of starlit sea, carrying with them the rhythm of life itself through the darkness. It is a rhythm as old as mammals, as fundamental as breath, as universal as sleep and waking. It is a rhythm we share with them, a common thread that connects all breathing, dreaming, and living things. In that rhythm, in those ripples spreading through the night, we hear the heartbeat of the ocean itself, the pulse of life continuing as it has continued for millions of years, as we hope it will continue for millions more, the giants dreaming in the deep, where they have always dreamed, where they must always be allowed to dream, in waters that remain wild and free and theirs.